Welcome to today's episode in which I am looking at black tax. Black tax. Black tax. Black tax. What exactly is black tax? So you find that this term black tax is a term that is mostly used by most of the Southern African countries such as Zambia, South Africa, Zimbabwe are the ones that have mostly embraced using the term black tax. Other countries in the continent use other terminologies, but in the southern part of Africa, black tax is what is prominent. Now, what is black tax exactly? So, black tax, this is tax that is paid by an individual to support parents, siblings, or extended family members. So it is more like it's unexpected socially. It is expected socially and culturally, not necessarily legally mandated. So what I'm trying to say is that black tax is money paid by an individual to support parents, siblings, or other extended family members. And this is something that comes as a culture, as a social activity. Not mandated, but expected. So activities of black tax could include paying for parents or siblings' education, could also include covering household bills or mortgage, which could also mean rent, could also include funding healthcare or any emergencies that comes, could also mean supporting weddings, funerals, or other family obligations. That is black tax. Now, have we always had black tax? Does it mean African people have always practiced black tax? Or has it always been there? So now, in looking at the origin of black tax, we can look at it in two ways, where I feel it would have resulted from. One angle could be through colonialism. So now when the colonial people came, the Europeans that is, there was a lot of restriction in the access to land and resources. So everything was grabbed by the Europeans. And we, the owners of the land, what was left to us is some unfertile lands and places where you could not earn as much as possible to even acquire anything that we could call wealth. So in countries such as South Africa, Zimbabwe, Zambia, authorities, that is colonial authorities, confiscated fertile land so that the European settlers themselves could occupy and earn wealth or gain wealth from that. So Black Africans were pushed into marginal lands or forced into labor reserves, limiting their ability to farm or profit or accumulate any wealth. There was also a lot of job segregation and very low wages when these European settlers were here. So you find that colonizers created racialized labor markets. So Black people were limited to low-paying menial jobs such as mine laborers, domestic servants, which are maids, or farm laborers. So you cannot, and when you look at those kind of jobs, it's impossible to even be able to do anything meaningful, let alone acquire any wealth from such activities. Then, of course, whites themselves dominated, jobs such as managerial in industries and commercial sectors. So they had the big chunks of where there was a lot of money coming from. So that kind of restricted Africans from ever earning any wealth from that. So now the impact on the black tax with restriction and job segregation, you find that black families could not accumulate any wealth independently. Any wages earned had to be shared by all the household members. And remember, I've said there was job segregation, meaning not everybody could earn a meaningful job. Whoever had a meaningful job, it meant that whatever they were earning from that job had to be shared among family members. And family then did not mean nuclear, it meant the whole extended family. And when whatever income you are getting is just being distributed, there's nothing that you can really save from there. Now, ultimately, with that created a norm where financial success had to be shared with extended family. So it became like a norm. People expected you to do that. Whatever you earned, you were expected, because culturally that is correct. So you were expected to do that, and it became a norm. It became a norm. So it was seen as okay. Yeah, it's understandable during that time, because if there's nowhere else to there's nothing available for you to do anything and make a meaningful living out of that. So it made sense back then. Then, of course, apart from that, there was a lot of migrant labor activities during the colonial period. That means wherever there was mining activities, for example, it meant laborers could migrate to where there's mining activities, and from there it meant that they left their families behind to go and work in the mines. So whatever they earned in the mines, they had to take back to their families. Now, over time with that, these remittances that they were sending to their families, it became like an expected obligation. And that also began the point of establishing the early cultural framework for black tax. So still on colonial, there was also education and skills barriers. So colonial policies limited access to quality education for black populations. So only a few could become professionals or secure skilled jobs. So those who escaped poverty through education or employment were expected to financially support members who remained disadvantaged. I think if you look at the most ministers that we had in the colony just after independence, when governments were formed ruled by the indigenous people of the land, you find that most of those had acquired some level of education either in Europe. So they had acquired a particular skill and they began earning a little something. So such kind of people, when they came back, it meant that they had to support their family. And when we say family, it's extended family. They had to support everybody, meaning trying to uplift them, trying to see how we can come out of poverty with that particular one individual. So those who remained disadvantaged, those who could not acquire, because it was very difficult to acquire education or any skill because of what colonial policies had in place. So those who acquired, it meant that they had the responsibility of building or uplifting their families economically and also improving their lives. Now, there was also what we are calling generational poverty and wealth inequality during colonial period. So you find that colonization created structural poverty. So Black families had little inheritance, there was few assets and no capital for businesses. Any young person entering the workforce inherited the responsibility of sustaining the whole extended family because no one else had wealth. So during that time, remember, they had grabbed land, they had grabbed all those areas with resources. So colonialism brought in a generational poverty and wealth inequality. That meant that the intergenerational reliance cemented Black tax as a survival mechanism and not just a cultural expectation. So that is what colonialism contributed to what we can call Black tax today. Now, I said there are two folds. So there's colonialism, then the second one is culture. Yes. So culturally, there is still what we call communalism and collective responsibility. That is one. So many African societies traditionally emphasize collectivism over individualism. So it is believed, or it is emphasized, that collectiveness, meaning sharing things together, earning together, uplifting one another and so on, rather than I myself. What was emphasized is collectivism rather than I, which is individualism. So families often operate as extended units, not just nuclear households. So resource sharing is expected, meaning those who earn have a responsibility to support the less fortunate relatives. So example, in Zambia, South Africa, Zimbabwe, it is common for multiple generations to live together or rely on each other for financial support. So I've seen a lot of this in the villages we lived as villages, where there was communities here and so on, and we lived together, shared and so on. Everything, whatever was earned, was shared as a community. So impact on that is that those young professionals who would have acquired probably a meaningful job were culturally expected to share income with parents, siblings, and even cousins. So now this cultural norm strengthens the practice of Black tax, and when it places financial burden on the owner. So it also places financial burden on the owner. So that is on culture. So under culture also it is expected for elders and ancestors to be respected. So how are they respected? African culture highly values respecting and caring for elders. That means supporting parents and other family members financially, and that was called a moral duty. So not providing or supporting these elderly meant that you're disrespecting or you are failing to what we are calling familial responsibility. So the impact now that that brought is that it reinforced Black tax, and it became as a social obligation and not merely a personal choice. So this respect-driven duty often extends to healthcare, housing, and education for elder family members. Now, there is also what we are calling Ubuntu philosophy and the culture. So Ubuntu, you find that most Southern African countries practice what we are calling Ubuntu, which translates to I am because we are. So Ubuntu emphasizes interconnectedness, empathy, and mutual support. So the idea is that individual success is meaningless if the community or family is left behind. So that is Ubuntu. Now, the impact that this Ubuntu philosophy has is that Black tax is seen as a way to fulfill Ubuntu, ensuring the well-being of the whole entire family network. So even if it limits personal financial growth, it is morally and socially valued. So there is also communal approaches to life events. So African societies traditionally share responsibilities when it comes to weddings, funerals, and any other ceremonies. So large social events often require financial contributions from all able family members, particularly the successful ones. All this one, I think, especially when it comes to funerals, is something that I would say must be expected. The weddings are being overdone, but on the funerals, I feel funerals are something that comes unexpected, and therefore people need to come together and share. But what I'm saying these days is that family members are not even the ones who are coming together when something of such nature happens. It's mostly the outside people of that family that kind of comes to help. Family members who are, like I'm talking about the extended family. Usually there are very few. Extended family relies on that one individual person, Bachite from town, to come and take over the whole event. But it's supposed to be every member of the family brings, whether it's to mealie meal, to cabbage, to whatever you can, and bring to the funeral activity. But these days it's the same very story of Black tax. To come and take over all the activities of the funeral. Weddings, I believe it's also, the responsibility of the family to kind of help this one couple that is beginning their life. Though these days I think it's becoming too much. People want the extravagant. Let's end there. So the impact is that Black tax extends beyond basic survival to fund cultural obligations, reinforcing its persistence across generations. So there is also what we are calling intergenerational responsibility. So this simply means that children are expected to pay back. I've heard this one though. To pay back the sacrifices made by their parents. So if your parents took you to school, I have heard of these things many times. So it's like, since they took you to school, you are supposed to pay back. You're supposed to pay your friends. It was your obligation. It was your obligation. You brought me here you brought me here. It's your obligation to take me to school and ensure when you leave this particular earth, your daughter, son are well, they are fine. It's your obligation. Now, it will also be my obligation when I get older to take care of my parents. Yes, because they don't have strength to do that, but not per se kind of payback. Payback simply means I gave you something and you pay me one day. But to take care, that is another different angle. It's just a cultural and a moral obligation, but not when we use payback, that kind of become wrong altogether. But that is how it is in some families. You find that others, they expect their children to pay back. Oh, I'm taking you to school because I'm expecting something in return. So the impact that has is that the black tax is both economical, it is both an economic necessity and a cultural repayment system linking familial duty to economic contribution. So those are two angles of where black tax would have originated from.